Now there are three reasons he compares devotees to sharks. Firstly, sharks live only in the ocean. Secondly, sharks reject the rivers. And thirdly, sharks are never caught in the fisherman's net. So the first meaning, sharks live only in the ocean. Why is that appropriate? And you can see Prabhupada gives beautiful explanation of that in the fourth paragraph. So the sharks, they refuse to reside in any lesser body of water. They don't go for shallow water. They don't go for any type of water. They just want to be in the big, huge ocean. So in the same way, the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the devotees of Lord Krishna, they simply want to reside in this ocean of bhakti. That's why we got Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And we said how Srila Rupa Goswami divides the ocean and then the waves. So these devotees of the Lord, they are only concerned with the beautiful ocean of bhakti. And they don't care of any lesser pleasure. They don't want to go to some estuary, into some river or anything. They just want to swim in the deep blue ocean, like the sharks, in the ocean of pure bhakti. And secondly, the sharks, they reject the rivers. And what is the rivers are compared to? Is the impersonalists. The impersonalists, they say, all rivers eventually merge into the ocean. They have the saying. There are many rivers coming from the mountain, this stream, this river, that river. But ultimately, they all come together. And what do? They merge into the ocean. And the impersonal are very fond of this merging concept, and to consider themselves rivers. But the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they not interested. And our Acharya says, the fault in this argument, Prabhupada once said, one Mayavadi was talking to Srila Prabhupada, and he said, Swamiji, all rivers lead to the ocean and merge. Prabhupada said, no. Some rivers dry up before they even reach the ocean. So the person in this river is like a small fish. So the fish, the saltwater fish, it's not that they eventually go into the ocean and swim in the salt water. No. They want to stay only in the fresh water. So even if there's a fish in that river, it'll come and it'll go in the estuary, but it'll never want to enter the salt water with the sharks. And it never goes. But the sharks, they are there in the ocean. And lastly, the sharks are never caught by the fisherman's net. Generally, the fishermen, they throw their net only maybe near the shore. Some of them stand in the shore, they throw the net. Some of them go into their boats and they put their net. But they don't put their net deep in the ocean. Therefore, the sharks who are swimming deep in the ocean, they never get caught in the net. And the bhaktas, the pure devotees of the Lord, they are like sharks. They're swimming deep in the ocean. The nets can't catch them, can't come anywhere near them. And here the net is considered the snare of birth and death. It can never touch the devotees of the Lord. So I thought that was a very interesting and relishable verse by Srila Rupa Goswami. How he compares the devotees of Lord Chaitanya who are swimming in this ocean of bhakti to be like sharks. And he starts off by offering his respects to all such devotees. So, and then we move on to the next verse. And there you see Srila Prabhupada in the 5th paragraph. Srila Rupa Goswami offers his respects to Sanatan Goswami. And he says, "O Sanatan, may your ocean of bhakti ras remain for a long time, restricting the harsh arguments of the proponents of karma and jnana, just as the ocean restricts the flame of the Vadhava fire." So in this 5th verse, he's praying to his spiritual master, Srila Sanatan Goswami. And what is his prayer? Please protect this book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, from the argumentative logicians. There are a class of logicians. All they do is they like to argue. They'll spend their whole day just arguing. And Srila Rupa Goswami is praying, and he compares their arguments and logics to the volcanic eruptions in the midst of the ocean. In the midst of the ocean, sometimes you get this volcanic eruptions. Sometimes when it's very big and it's close enough to the shore, you can get a tsunami. But the majority of these eruptions, volcanic eruptions in the middle of the ocean, they just don't do much harm at all. So Srila Rupa Goswami is praying to Sanatana Goswami, please protect this book from these logicians, and who pray that they cannot disturb the great ocean of devotional service. So again, it's very nice, this analogy of the ocean. This eruption in the big ocean does not make a difference to the ocean. So this eruption of the logicians and these argumentative scholars, it can't really do much in this ocean of bhakti. Therefore, if a devotee is very strongly, very deeply situated in his bhakti, in his devotional service, he may be confronted with so many types of arguments, even within the platform or school of bhakti. They don't get disturbed, just like the ocean doesn't get with it. Just carry on. You know, nowadays in ISKCON, there are so many things that erupts, Ritvik eruption, or where did the jiva come from eruption. And there's already something new is coming up. And there are some devotees that just get swallowed in these arguments, and they start arguing, they start debating, and they're saying, no, this is right, this is, and they completely lose their objective. But Srila Rupa Goswami is not appealing to those devotees. We should be like what Srila Rupa Goswami is saying here. And if we study and absorb ourselves in this nectar of devotion, just like the sharks, then we will not be affected. So these are all very interesting arguments. And in the 6th verse, he says, although I'm ignorant, I've undertaken this work concerning Bhakti Rasa led to Krishna, is auspicious for the whole world, for the joy of my friends. And Srila Prabhupada, I'll read what Srila Prabhupada writes in connection with this particular verse. He says, the author of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami, very humbly submits that he is just trying to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, although he humbly thinks himself unfit for this work. That should be the attitudes of the preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement, following in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami. We should never think of ourselves as great preachers. Now, what I found very interesting in this verse, this word, Suridam Pramodhaya. So when Srila Rupa Goswami was writing this book, who was he writing for it? Was he thinking, wow, 500 years from now, this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he's going to somehow or the other be translated to English. It's going to go throughout the world, and it's just going to flood the world with bhakti. He was not thinking like that. When he was writing the book, what was he thinking? This book is for the joy of my friends. This was his attitude. His attitude was, he was not thinking, oh, I'm a bigger author. This is going to send ripples throughout the world. one day. His mood was so humble. He's thinking, if my friends can get some pleasure from reading this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that will be my success. Just see the humility of Srila Rupa Goswami. And then the 6th verse, you can see, again, Prabhupada writes here. He gives all credit for this book to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he understood, and as we read previously, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu impregnated within his heart this entire science of devotion. It came from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when it was placed in his heart. So he was not thinking, oh, yes, I'm writing. No. He was just thinking, this is simply the empowerment of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is simply the empowerment of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Prabhupada writes, this should be the attitude of the Krishna consciousness movement preachers. So all of us, we are preachers, even if we do not think it so. We are preachers, and we must be preachers as followers of Srila Prabhupada. And this is the mood we need to have. And he writes, Rupa Goswami Prabhupada explains, he explains his eagerness to write Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu for the pleasure of the devotees. And then he gives a blessing. Whoever reads his book to achieve transcendental happiness. So that's us. We're getting this blessing of Srila Rupa Goswami. By reading this book, dear devotees, may all of us achieve transcendental happiness. And then the next verses, these are the verses 7 to 12, 7 to 10, 7, 8, 9, and 10. You see, this is he describes how this book is divided in the east, south, north, and west, which we described earlier. And then he talks about the subsections and so on. And after all of this, this can be called invoking auspiciousness, giving blessings. This is all part of the Mangala Charan. Then he starts, Srila Rupa Goswami goes into the part where he's describing now, he's giving a definition of bhakti. So this whole book, this ocean of bhakti, the waves of bhakti, everything about bhakti is going to be described in this book. That means firstly, we must start off by understanding what is the definition of bhakti. What is the definition of bhakti? So this is what Srila Rupa Goswami writes. And he writes that so beautifully that what is bhakti? When we talk about bhakti, what does it mean? And this is where we get to what is called the Paribhasa Sutra. The seed verse, the nutshell verse. That means the whole of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this book, is based on this one verse, which defines bhakti. But not any type of bhakti. He's describing Uttama bhakti. Uttama means the topmost, the greatest, the purest bhakti. This is what Srila Rupa Goswami will now describe. And this is the Paribhasa Sutra verse. Now, when we study Nectar of Devotion, every student has to learn this verse. So I would recommend that you verse. Who knows this verse off by heart? Anyone knows this Paribhasa Sutra by heart?
I only know, I think, little bit, Prabhuji.
You want to have a try?
Anyabhilashita sunyam gnana-vrutam
Jnana karmadi.
Gnana karmadhyana-vrutam
Anukulyena.
anukulyena shilanun You finish it, Prabhuji.
Bhakti Uttama. Bhakti Uttama. So this is the verse. Anya Bilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam Anakulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. So the translation, this is how Srila Prabhupada has nicely translated this verse. When first-class devotional service develops, so Srila Prabhupada translates Uttama Bhakti as first-class devotional service. Not second class, third class, first class, Pakka devotional service. What happens? One must become devoid of all material desires. Knowledge obtained by monastic philosophy and fruit of action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So this requires a bit more explanation. But one thing I just want to explain, you will notice about Srila Rupa Goswami in this book. Whatever statement Srila Rupa Goswami makes about bhakti in support of what he's stating in this book, he always backs it up by praman, by some evidence in the Vedic literature. There's only one or two times he composes his own verses, like the 5 most potent forms of devotional service. There, Srila Rupa Goswami, he composes his own verses. And there are 1 or 2 places in this book, he composes his own verses. But the gist of what Srila Rupa Goswami does in this book is every statement he makes, he supports it by some praman, some evidence. So someone may ask, okay, Srila Rupa Goswami is giving this definition of what is pure devotional service. Is this something that he came up with? So what is the basis of this definition of Srila Rupa Goswami? Therefore, immediately after writing this verse in the 11th verse, in the 12th verse, he quotes this very famous verse. All of you, or many of you may know, Sarva Padi Vinirmuktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchyate. So this is from the Narada Pancharatra, which is one of the Vedic texts. And the translation of this verse is bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme Lord, there are 2 side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. Now, when we dive deeper into Srila Rupa Goswami's verse of Anya Bilashita Shunyam, you will see how it parallels this Vedic verse so nicely. Dear devotees, how are y'all doing? Y'all with me at the moment, or am I losing y'all? I'm going on like a scholar today.
No, we're here.
Yeah, you're following me?
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Very nice class. Thank you.
All right, everyone's okay?
Yes,
No?
Prabhuji. Yes,
Okay.
Prabhuji.
All right. Okay. If you want me to just pause here, you got any personal reflections or comments or questions, I'm happy to just pause here for a moment. Anyone's got any reflections or comments or questions? No? Okay. So let's dissect this verse now. Let's dissect this verse, Anya Bilashita Shunya. You will notice this verse is divided into what we call 2 qualities or characteristics. In the Vedic science or in Vedic verses, you will see there's two aspects of the verses. One is called Swarup Lakshana, meaning essential qualities. That means these are essential qualities, if you do not have these essential qualities, we cannot fit into the category of Uttama Bhakti. And then there's the other one called Tatastha Lakshana, marginal qualities, means it may or may not be there. So we'll discuss that in that context. It may seem a little scholarly, but if you get it, you will just be completely amazed by this verse, and you'll make this verse like your little treasure. It's so beautiful. So he starts off with this verse. We'll dissect Anya Bilashita Sunyam. So Sunyam, you all know what it means. What does Sunyam means? It makes
Zero, absence, zero.
Yes, it means making zero. Just like we say Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatari. Srila Prabhupada came to deal with these people who wanted to make everything impersonal or zero, void. Shunyam. So firstly, this verse is saying you must make all other desires zero. This is pure devotional service. And he will go on to next explain what are these other desires that need to be made zero. So jnana means the desire for mental speculation, or particularly of an impersonal nature, or the desire to merge into impersonal Brahman. Then the next one is karma. So this is the desire for ritualistic material activity. That means you do some activity, and deeply underlying this activity is some desire to get some fruit in return. And that fruit, it may have some tinges or elements of giving to Krishna, but at the core of it, that fruit is for us. So this needs to also be made zero, Sunyam. Third is Adi, any other desire of a non-Krishna conscious nature. So it may be anything. It may be anything, but it's any other desire of a non-Krishna conscious nature. Then we come to the word Anukulyena. This is about our mood. It must be favorable. Then Krishna Anushilanam. It must be for Krishna. And I'll go into each of those words a bit more deep. I'm just giving you the breakdown now, high level breakdown. Then Anushilanam, it must be an activity of cultivation. It must be doing something. It's not just some inert, passive type of activity. It must be active. And anavrita means not covered by. So we'll go through each of these words again, a bit more detail. So the Swarup Lakshana, essential qualities. Firstly, it must be for Krishna. If it's not for Krishna, then it can't fall in the category of Uttama Bhakti. So essential quality number one, it must be for Krishna. Now Srila Prabhupada gives us a very nice understanding of what we mean when we talk about Krishna. Prabhupada says, when we speak of Krishna, we refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with his many expansions. He is expanded by his plenary parts and parcels. He is differentiated parts and parcels and his different energies. Krishna, in other words, means everything and includes everything. Generally, however, we should understand Krishna to mean Krishna and his personal associates. So Prabhupada is giving now a broad and the proper understanding of what Krishna means. Krishna is not only two-armed Shyamasundar playing on his flute. it's all his expansions. Lord Ram, Lord Varaha, Lord Nrsimha, Lord Vishnu. And then Prabhupada also says, Krishna also means his dham, his abode, his leela, his pastimes, his name, and also his devotees. Krishna means his devotees. So one time, one disciple of Srila Prabhupada asked, by serving the spiritual master, this talks about Krishna, is that also pure devotional service? Prabhupada said yes. Because what is the spiritual master doing? The spiritual master is serving Krishna. So by serving the spiritual master, you're serving Krishna. And Krishna says, Tad viri pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadikshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. Just surrender onto the surrendered souls, self-realized souls. Krishna, so following Krishna's instructions is also serving Krishna. So firstly, this word, Krishna Anushilanam, there's a broad definition of what is meant by Krishna. And if we follow this broad definition, then that falls within the remit of pure devotional service. Does everyone understand? Does that make sense? Krishna's paraphernalia, Krishna's expansions, Krishna's devotees.
Yes, it does.
It's all falling within the definition of Krishna. Krishna's name, you're serving Krishna's name, that's pure devotional service. So that's a beautiful understanding that Srila Prabhupada is giving us. Now the next one is of the Swarup Lakshana qualities is Anushilanam. The word cultivate, just like when we say the man is cultivating his field, he doesn't mean that he's just sitting and he's looking at his field. That is not considered cultivation. Cultivation means he's in his field, he's digging the ground, he's planting some seed, he's doing something, it's some activity. Anushilanam, the Prabhupada says, it does not mean silent meditation. One has to actually do something for Krishna's pleasure. And the idea is, it has to be going uninterrupted. Not I'll serve Krishna very nicely for 1 month, then I take a holiday. Then I serve Krishna another 2 months, then I take another holiday where I forget about Krishna. No. Anushilana means it must be going on uninterrupted. No break. The service for Krishna, it's a cultivation that's continuous. And Prabhupada writes, there's 2 aspects of Anushilanam. Pravriti, the pursuance of activities that are favorable to Krishna consciousness, and Nivriti, avoidance of activities unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. And he says there are 3 ways to perform this Pravriti and Nivriti, with body, mind, and words. Prabhupada giving another very, very interesting definition, again taking from Rupa Goswami. It's the positive injunctions and the negative prohibitions. Both are considered aspects of Anushilanam. And the Prabhupada then in his writing, he analyzed different agents of activity: the body, the mind, and the words. So sometimes someone may say, you know, he's just sitting there, not doing anything. But the definition of bhakti says it must be activity and it must be ongoing. So I don't think he's doing Uttama Bhakti. A cross for him. No. Maybe the body is not functioning, but the mind may be so deeply absorbed in service. Later on in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami tells a beautiful story about one Brahmana how he did not have the ingredients, but in his mind, he decided to prepare the sweet rice. And in his mind, he was collecting the milk. He was making the fire. He was putting the pot. He was boiling the milk. He was putting the sugar. He was putting the rice. He was stirring all in his mind. And in his mind, he wanted to feel the temperature of the sweet rice, all in his mind. He put his finger in the sweet rice. He got burnt. And he got up and he's looking to himself. He's saying, but this was all in meditation. How did my finger get burnt? He was doing manasa seva. So this cultivation, this anushilanam, it takes place on the level of the body, mind, and words. So this again, very, very, and Prabhupada explained something very nice there. And in terms of negative, he says, just like the 10 items of devotional service are do's and don'ts, you must accept the spiritual master, you must take initiation from him, you must follow the instruction. And then the next 10 items are don'ts. You should not commit offenses. You should not listen to blasphemy of the devotees. You should not associate intimately with the devotees, non-devotees. So both the positive actions and the negative actions are included in the term anushilanam, cultivation or activity. So when we are avoiding the non-devotees, when we are avoiding blasphemy of devotees, according to Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada, that is anushilanam. It's a cultivation. And the next one is a very interesting one. Anukulyena, favorable. This is very important. There are two applications of the criteria of favorability. And what is that? The first one is our mood must be favorable. And the second one is it must be for Krishna's pleasure. So there are two tests here. One is our mood must be favorable, and two, it must be for Krishna's pleasure. Now let's look at some examples, some interesting examples. So in the Damodar Leela, right? Mother Yashoda was feeding Krishna. Then the milk started to boil over. She left Krishna down and she went to tend to the milk. Krishna became very upset. So it wasn't for Krishna's pleasure, apparently, externally. So can we say that Mother Yashoda was performing pure devotional service according to this definition? Anyone like to say?
The milk that Mother Yashoda was boiling was for Krishna anyway.
Yes.
Everything that she did was for Krishna.
Yes.
And so her motivation was always, everything was for Krishna. She wasn't in Maya. She was always thinking of Krishna.
Yes. Yes.
That's how I see it. I don't know
Yes.
what it is.
It's correct. It's correct. The Acharyas have also given another explanation. So the milk was boiling on the stove, right? And Mother Yashoda was feeding Krishna breast milk. So this milk, we know in the spiritual world, everything is conscious. The milk is conscious, the rice is conscious, the stone is conscious, everything is conscious in Goloka Vrindavan. So the milk was also a devotee of Krishna. And the milk was thinking to itself, you know what? My life is useless. That milk in Mother Yashoda's breast is so fortunate, is getting to feed Krishna. But here I am, not rendering any service. I am just useless. So I'm going to commit suicide. So he was going to boil over and suicide himself in the flame. So Mother Yashoda, when she went to take the milk that was about to boil over, she was serving a devotee of Krishna. And we read previously what is considered Krishna in this verse. Krishna, his devotees, and everyone. So Mother Yashoda was actually serving Krishna's devotees. So although she put Krishna down, actually Krishna, it was all Leela. He was pleased, but externally he was acting. He was angry, but she was serving Krishna. Krishna's devotee. Does that make sense to you all? Do you all understand this point?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, yes, very nice.
So the next one is, there was a story, right? The devotees used to go see one life member in Bombay. And this life member, he was very devoted of Krishna. So when the devotees would come to his office, he would offer them chai, tea. Now this is not our decaffeinated tea. This is the full tea, full-blown tea with all the caffeine loaded in it. So he would have his tea brought to him. The devotees would say, no, thank you. And then when his tea came, he would reach out to the bottom drawer in his desk. He would pull out a little box with tulsi leaves. Then he would take one tulsi leaf and he'll put in the tea. And he would tell the devotees, Swamiji, I don't drink anything by first offering tulsi, then I drink. So do you all think that he was performing Uttama Bhakti?
No. He was having caffeine.
Yeah, his mood was favorable, yeah, but it was not what Krishna desired. The
She
spiritual
said,
master said, don't drink tea with caffeine in it. So he ticked the first box, but he didn't tick the second box. So although the mood was favorable, it was not as Krishna desired. It was not as Krishna desired, because Krishna doesn't like his devotees taking intoxicants. So the third example here is Kamsa. Kamsa, he was 24 hours a day thinking of Krishna. 24 hours a day thinking of Krishna. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Man mana bhava mad bhakto. Always think of me. Krishna says the great souls, they are constantly thinking about me. So will we put Kamsa, by dint of he's always thinking of Krishna, can we put him in the category of Anukulyena? Anyone?
no, because he was contemplating how to kill him.
Yes. He was thinking of Krishna all the time, but he was not favorable mood. He was thinking how to kill Krishna, how to kill Krishna. Or he was thinking, and he got purified thinking of Krishna, but mood was not favorable. So we do not consider Kamsa in the category of Uttama Bhakti. He doesn't fulfill the criteria of Anukulyena. So it's now 7 o'clock. We've been speaking for an hour. I think that in essence covers the Tatastha Lakshana, the intrinsic essential qualities for Uttama. Next week we'll carry on with the, that's the Swarup Lakshana. Next week we'll carry on with the Tatastha Lakshana, the marginal qualities of this verse. So we'll stop here for today and we'll take any questions, comments, or reflections that anyone may have.
Prabhuji, I just want to say, I read books and so many novels and other things I've read, but I've never seen even the invocation part is so interesting. So this is really different. Like you always ignore prefaces in most of the books, but this is beyond. This is really, really extraordinary, I would say. Thanks for this. That's really nice.
That's such a nice realization, Kishore Prabhu. I also had that realization. You know, like sometimes when you buy a new book, you just like skip the preface and the introduction. You say, let me go to the bulk of it. But if you do that, you're going to miss something really, really relishable in this nectar of devotion. It's every page, every word is, as Prabhupada says, every word is nectar in these books. It's so beautiful. And then you can see how loyal Srila Prabhupada is to every word of Srila Rupa Goswami. Although it's a summary study, and For me, I never failed to my mind boggle. How did Srila Prabhupada do it? How did he do it? He had the original text there, but he just weaved and he just wrote every paragraph so true to every single verse. And he did it in such a short space of time. It is nothing short of absolute brilliance by Srila Prabhupada, the way he's done this. It's just extraordinary, truly extraordinary. Any other questions, comments, or reflections?
Prabhuji, I'm a little bit confused about Swarupa Lakshana, and you said Tata Swarup marginal. So can you just maybe
Okay.
concentrate?
So in Sanskrit definitions, Chandrika Mataji,
Yeah.
what is called Swarup Lakshana. Swarup Lakshana means essential or intrinsic qualities. And Tatastha means marginal. So what it essentially means, in the definitions, there are some characteristics that are just given. You can't miss them, you can't dilute them, you can't shorten them. They have to be there. But the Tatastha, the secondary, it may or may not be there for the definition. So it's like for Uttama Bhakti, being for Krishna is an absolute must. Yeah. Anushilanam, it has to be an activity, a type of cultivation, either with body, minds, work. It's an absolute must. If it's missing, it will not fall within the category of Uttama Bhakti. And then Anukulyena, this mood favorable, and Krishna, according to Krishna's liking, it has to be there. The other ones like Tatastha, void of every desire, Prabhupada says is, like we are not, like sometimes someone asks Prabhupada, in the beginning days, how many pure devotees you have in your movement, Swamiji? And Prabhupada turned to his secretary, says, how many devotees we got in New York? Prabhupada, I think we got 20. How many in Chicago? 20, Prabhupada. How many in San Francisco? How many in Ontario? Or Prabhupada, 50 devotees, they said. Oh, that's how many devotees we've got. But Prabhupada knew that his early disciples, they were not free of material desires. They were still there. But because they were totally surrendered to Srila Prabhupada, these three essential intrinsic qualities were there. Prabhupada says they were following Uttama Bhakti. You get what I'm trying to say, Chandrika Mataji?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, dear devotees, thank you so much for your participation. You're coming together. Please try to read before you come to our session. Try to read like next week. I would suggest next week we'll finish the definition of pure devotional service. And then we will discuss the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. And the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, they are covered in chapter number 1, the characteristics of pure devotional service. So please read chapter number 1, and that's also a very, very interesting chapter. If you can do that, it'll just enhance our discussion and it'll enhance your understanding of what's being spoken about.
The material, Prabhuji, do you think we can have it shared and we can print it ourselves at home?
I will put the slides onto our forum. I will PDF it, I'll put it in our forums and you can have it like that.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll try and do last week's also.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha. Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo. Anantikoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Lord of Premanand.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.